What happens when your safe harbor becomes the storm itself? Kate never imagined that a burst pipe would lead her straight to Henry's penthouse. Her best friend, her boss, the man she'd carefully kept at a safe distance for years. But when he opened that door, wearing nothing but a tight t-shirt and low-slung sweatpants, something shifted. The air between them grew heavier. Their gazes lingered longer. And when he stepped out of the shower that first morning, water still dripping down his chest, she realized the truth she'd been hiding, even from herself. Some desires don't stay buried forever. This is the story of two people who thought they knew each other until they started living under the same roof. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and become a member to get early access to upcoming stories. And if you felt it was really worth listening to, click the super thanks button too. Your support makes all the difference and helps us keep bringing you stories that move you. The smell of old coffee and damp wood filled Kate's small apartment as she stood in the doorway, watching the plumber shake his head with that universal expression of bad news. Water pooled around her feet, seeping from beneath the bathroom door like an unwelcome guest that refused to leave. Her landlord had already made it clear repairs would take at least 2 weeks, maybe 3, and she needed to leave. Now, Kate Morrison was 32 years old, had a solid career as a project manager, and a carefully organized life where every piece had its place. She wasn't the type of person who improvised. But there she was, with a suitcase open on the bed, throwing clothes in without thinking, feeling her heart race with that uncomfortable sensation of losing control. The timing couldn't have been worse. It was early December. The city was packed, and every decent hotel was charging outrageous prices because of the holiday season. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Henry, of course, it would be him. "Kate, I heard about the apartment. Come stay with me." His voice was firm, leaving no room for discussion. Henry Blake wasn't just her best friend of 8 years. He was also her boss, the CEO of the company where she worked, and the only person who could read her thoughts before she even voiced them. They'd met at a conference in Boston when he was still building the company, and she was just a junior analyst trying to impress. There was an immediate connection, but always safe, always within the boundaries of friendship. "Henry, I can't just—" "Yes, you can. I have 3 empty bedrooms. And before you say you'll look for a hotel, I already checked all the ones in the area. They're fully booked." She laughed, but it was a nervous laugh. "You didn't do that." "I didn't. But it worked, didn't it? Come on. No drama." And that's how, 4 hours later, Kate found herself in front of Henry's building, a glass and steel tower in the heart of Manhattan, holding 2 suitcases and a strange feeling in her stomach. The inciting incident wasn't just the burst pipe. It was the decision to accept his invitation, to cross that invisible line they'd always maintained between them. The elevator rose silently to the top floor. When the doors opened, she could hear jazz music playing softly, something instrumental and smooth that seemed to float through the hallway. The penthouse door was slightly ajar. "Henry, come in. I'm in the kitchen." She pushed the door open and was greeted by a space that looked like it came straight out of an architecture magazine. High ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the illuminated city, minimalist furniture in shades of gray and white. But what really captured her attention was Henry coming out of the kitchen with 2 wine glasses in hand. He looked different, or maybe she'd never really paid attention. The white t-shirt was tight enough to show the contours of his chest, his broad shoulders, the defined arms she'd never noticed under his impeccable office suits. The gray sweatpants sat low on his hips, revealing a line of tanned skin that disappeared beneath the fabric, bare feet, dark hair slightly tousled, as if he'd run his hand through it absent-mindedly. Kate held her breath without meaning to. "Wine?" He extended a glass, smiling in that casual way that always made her feel at home. But there was something different about the smile, too. Something slower, more intentional. Yes, thank you." She took the glass, her fingers brushing against his for a second longer than necessary. The main conflict was already established, even if neither of them wanted to admit it. How to keep their friendship intact when their bodies insisted on reminding them they were a man and a woman alone, sharing the same space. How to ignore years of carefully controlled tension when there were no longer walls separating them. "Let me show you the room." Henry placed his hand lightly on her back, guiding her down the hallway. The touch was casual, but she felt every millimeter of it. Her skin burned through the thin blouse. The guest room was spacious and welcoming, with a king-size bed covered in pristine white sheets, a huge closet, and a private bathroom. Through the window, New York's lights twinkled like fallen stars. "It's perfect," she murmured, setting the suitcases on the floor. "Henry, seriously, I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to thank me." He leaned against the door frame, crossing his arms in a way that made the muscles in his biceps stand out. "We're friends. That's what friends do." The word friends hung in the air between them like an unspoken lie. Kate took a long sip of wine, needing something to occupy her hands, to distract from the way his gaze traveled across her face with a new attention, almost studied. She knew every expression of his, every micro-expression. But this one was different. There was curiosity there, and something more dangerous, barely disguised desire. "You must be tired," he said finally, pushing himself off the door frame. "I'll let you get settled, but come down after. I ordered Thai food, that place you love." How did he always remember everything? When Henry left, closing the door softly, Kate let herself fall onto the bed, her heart beating too fast. She stared at the ceiling, trying to process. It was just 2 weeks, maybe 3. She could keep her composure. She could ignore the heat she felt when he touched her back. The way her stomach flipped when she saw that bit of skin at his waist. She could pretend nothing had changed, but deep down, she already knew the truth. Everything had already changed the moment she walked through that door. An hour later, they were sitting on the wide living room sofa, Thai food boxes scattered on the coffee table, a second bottle of wine already half empty. The conversation flowed easily, as it always had between them: work, inside jokes, office gossip. But there were pauses now, loaded. Silences where their eyes met and lingered longer than they should. "Did you change something here?" Kate asked, looking around. "Feels different." "I didn't change anything." Henry turned to her, his arms stretched along the back of the sofa, his fingers inches from her shoulder. "Maybe it's you who's seeing differently." The phrase had weight. They both knew it. "Maybe," she admitted quietly, taking another sip of wine, feeling the warmth spread through her chest. Or maybe it was his proximity, the woody scent of the cologne he wore, the way the room's dim light made shadows dance across his face. Henry leaned slightly closer. Henry stepped forward, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made the air feel heavier. "Kate!" His voice was huskier, lower. She could feel her heart race. "What?" But he seemed to change his mind at the last second, looking away and smiling in an almost shy way, which was completely out of character for Henry Blake, the man who commanded meetings with investors without blinking. "Nothing, just, I'm glad you're here." Disappointment and relief mixed in her chest. What had she expected him to say? And more importantly, what did she want him to say? "Me too," she replied, and it wasn't a lie. They stayed there side by side, watching an old movie neither of them paid attention to. But Kate was hyper-aware of every movement he made. The way he stretched his legs, the way he ran his hand through his hair, the way his knee brushed against hers, and neither of them pulled away. When the movie ended, it was past midnight. Kate yawned, trying to hide the nervousness she felt. "I'm going to bed," she announced, standing up. "I have that early meeting tomorrow with the developers." "I know. I'll be there." Henry also stood, taller than she remembered, or maybe it was because he was so much closer now, much closer. They stood there in the middle of the living room, just one step apart. The city outside continued its dance of lights, but inside the apartment, the world had shrunk to just the two of them. Henry raised his hand slowly, as if giving her time to pull back, but she didn't. His fingers brushed her face, gently sweeping away a strand of hair that had fallen over her eyes. The touch was light, almost reverent, but it burned. "Good night, Kate." "Good night, Henry." She turned and walked toward the bedroom, feeling his gaze on her back with every step. When she closed the door, she leaned against it, eyes closed, breathing unevenly. What was happening and why? For the first time in 8 years, didn't she want to fight it? Outside, Henry remained standing in the same spot for long minutes, looking at the closed guest room door. He ran his hand over his face, letting out a long, frustrated sigh. Keeping that secret was getting harder and harder. And now, with her there, so close, so present. How was he going to survive the next 2 weeks without crossing the one line he'd promised himself he'd never cross? The first rays of Sunday morning light filtered through the sheer curtains, painting golden stripes across Kate's face. She woke slowly, disoriented for a moment before remembering where she was. Henry's penthouse. The guest room that smelled faintly of lavender and expensive linen. The city outside already humming with life, even though it was barely 7 a.m. She stretched, feeling the tension from yesterday still coiled in her muscles. Not from the move, but from something else entirely, something she wasn't ready to name yet. Kate decided that coffee would be the perfect solution to clear her mind. She slipped on a short silk robe over her nightgown, something she'd packed without thinking much about, but that now seemed inappropriately revealing for the situation. But it was Sunday morning, and Henry was probably still sleeping. There was no reason to worry. She opened the bedroom door quietly and headed down the hallway toward the kitchen, her bare feet gliding across the cold marble floor. The apartment was quiet, wrapped in the peculiar stillness of weekend mornings. Through the immense windows, New York stretched out like an ocean of concrete and glass. But in here it was as if the world had paused. Kate was almost at the kitchen when she heard the sound. Water running, the bathroom door opening, steam escaping into the hallway, and then she saw him. Henry emerged from the bathroom as if he'd stepped out of a dream or a nightmare, depending on how much self-control she could maintain. He was shirtless, wearing only a white towel draped carelessly over his shoulder and gray sweatpants hanging dangerously low on his hips. Drops of water slid slowly down his neck, descending over his collarbone, gliding down his defined chest, tracing each abdominal muscle as if mapping every inch of tan skin deliberately. His dark hair was wet, messy, with some strands falling over his forehead. He was using the other towel to dry off absent-mindedly, the muscles in his arms flexing with the movement. The morning light hit him directly, highlighting every line, every contour, every detail Kate had never allowed herself to notice before. But now, she noticed. God, how she noticed. The air left her lungs all at once. Her entire body froze in the middle of the hallway, as if her feet had grown roots into the marble floor. She knew she should look away, move on, pretend she hadn't seen anything. But her eyes had a will of their own, traveling the length of that body as if memorizing something forbidden. And then Henry lifted his head and saw her. For a second, maybe two, maybe an eternity, they just looked at each other. The towel stopped in midair, halfway to his head. His eyes, dark honey-colored, fixed on hers with an intensity that made Kate's stomach knot tightly. She saw the exact moment he realized what she was doing. Saw the corner of his mouth curve into a slow, dangerous smile, completely aware of the effect he was having. "Sorry," he said finally, but there was no apology in his voice. There was something else. Amusement, perhaps, or challenge. "I forgot you were here, liar." He hadn't forgotten anything. Kate forced herself to breathe, desperately trying to recover some kind of composure. "I was going to make coffee." The words came out fragmented, disconnected. She cleared her throat. "To make coffee. Coffee, right?" Henry threw the towel over his shoulder again, taking a step toward her. One single step, but it seemed to shrink all the space between them. "Want me to make it?" "No." The answer came out too loud, too fast. Kate felt heat rise up her neck, coloring her cheeks. "I mean, you don't have to. I'll make it." He was closer now, close enough for her to smell the soap, something fresh and masculine that made her legs weak. Close enough to see the drops of water still caught in his lashes. Close enough to realize he was studying her face with the same attention she'd studied his body seconds earlier. "You sure?" Henry tilted his head slightly, his eyes quickly dropping to the silk robe that suddenly seemed too transparent under his gaze. "You look distracted." "I'm fine." But her voice was shaky. "Are you?" He took another step. Now he was too close, invading her personal space in a way that was both terrifying and electrifying. She could see the movement of his chest as he breathed. She could count every drop of water still sliding slowly down his skin. "Because you're blushing. I'm warm." The sound came deep from his throat, almost like a purr. "Iced coffee." Then Kate blinked, trying to process the words. "What? You said you wanted coffee? But if you're warm." He leaned in imperceptibly, his voice dropping to a whisper that seemed to slide over her skin like silk. "Maybe iced coffee would be better. With lots of ice." She swallowed hard. Her heart was beating so loudly she was certain he could hear it. "Coffee with ice." "Yes, good idea." Henry smiled. That smile she knew, but that somehow seemed completely new. There was mischief there, intention, and something that made her entire body wake up, as if someone had lit a match to her nerves. "I'm going to get dressed," he said, but didn't move. He stayed there, so close that if she took a deep breath, their bodies would touch. "Unless you want me to stay like this." It was pure provocation, and Kate knew it. But she couldn't formulate a response that wouldn't completely give her away. "Change? You should change your clothes," she managed to stammer. "If you insist." He walked past her, so close that his arm brushed against hers. A brief electric touch that sent shivers down her entire spine. But before disappearing down the hallway, he stopped and looked over his shoulder. "Kate." "Yes. You look different today, too." And then he was gone, leaving her alone in the hallway, her heart racing, her legs trembling, and a feeling of heat in her stomach that had nothing to do with the apartment's temperature. Kate practically ran to the kitchen, bracing her hands on the marble counter, closing her eyes tight. What the hell was happening? They were friends, best friends. She'd known him for 8 years. They worked together, shared secrets, trusted each other with everything. But in that moment in the hallway, there was nothing friendly about the way he looked at her, and definitely nothing friendly about the way she looked back. She prepared the coffee on autopilot, her hands still slightly shaky. The machine hummed its comforting sound, and the rich, dark aroma began to fill the kitchen. Kate leaned against the counter again, trying to organize her thoughts. This was physical attraction. Just that. Brain chemistry reacting to visual stimuli. Completely normal. She was human. He was what she'd just seen. Any woman would have the same reaction, right? It didn't mean anything. It didn't change anything. But then why was her body still vibrating? Why could she still feel the ghost of his arm brushing against hers? Coffee ready. Kate almost dropped the mug. Henry entered the kitchen, now dressed. Black running shorts and a tank top that honestly didn't help much in her mission to regain mental balance. The thin fabric outlined every line of his torso. "Almost," she murmured, turning to the coffee machine as if it were the most fascinating thing in the world. Henry approached, grabbing 2 mugs from the cabinet above her head. The movement made his body press lightly against her back, and Kate felt every inch of that contact through the thin robe. He didn't pull away immediately. He stayed there, his chest grazing her shoulders, his warmth enveloping her like a wave. "Have you always smelled like lavender?" His voice was right behind her ear, low and intimate. Kate closed her eyes for a second, fighting the urge to lean back, to let herself be completely wrapped up by him. "It's the soap I use. I like it." He finally pulled away, but his fingers brushed lightly against her waist as he grabbed the mugs. Accidental, intentional? She didn't know anymore. They prepared their coffee in silence, a heavy silence loaded with unspoken things. Kate added too much sugar to her cup and didn't even notice until she took the first sip and grimaced. Henry laughed. "Nervous?" "No. No." He leaned against the opposite counter, crossing his arms over his chest, his head tilted in an amused expression. "Because you just put like 4 spoonfuls of sugar in there. I like it sweet." "Since when?" "Since you came out of that bathroom and my brain stopped working properly," she thought, but she said, "Since today." Henry took a sip of his own coffee, his eyes never leaving her face. "You know what I think, Kate?" "What?" She tried to sound casual, but her voice came out tense. "I think you're running from me." Her heart jumped. "I'm not." You are. Ever since you woke up. He set his mug aside and took a step toward her. Then another. Why? I'm not, Kate. Her name in his mouth sounded different, softer, more dangerous. Look at me. She didn't want to. Looking at him meant admitting what was happening. Meant dropping the last protective barrier she maintained between them. But she looked anyway, slowly raising her eyes until they met his, and what she saw there left her breathless. Desire, pure, direct, undeniable. It was no longer subtext or suggestion. It was there, exposed like a silent confession. What's happening? She whispered. Henry moved closer, eliminating the space between them until she could feel the heat of his body. You know exactly what's happening. Henry, tell me you didn't feel it. He raised his hand, his fingers hovering inches from her face, not touching yet, but promising. Tell me that when you saw me this morning, you didn't feel anything. She should lie, should laugh, make a joke, break the tension. But the words didn't come because it would be a lie, and she'd never lied to him. She swallowed hard. I felt it. His smile was slow, triumphant. I know this can't happen. But even as she said it, her body was leaning toward him like a magnet without control. Why not? Because we're friends. Because you're my boss. Because it'll complicate everything. What if I don't care about any of that? His fingers finally touched her face, sliding along her jawline with a gentleness that contrasted with the intensity in his eyes. Kate trembled under the touch. Henry, just tell me one thing. He leaned in, his lips so close to hers. She could feel his breath mixing with hers. Do you want me to stop? That was the question, wasn't it? The only one that mattered. She could say yes, could pull back, could save their friendship, keep everything on safe, familiar tracks, could pretend that moment in the hallway never happened, that her body wasn't begging for more, that she hadn't spent the last 8 years burying something that was now exploding to the surface like a dormant volcano. She could, but she wasn't going to. No, she whispered. I don't want you to stop. And then there was no more space between them, no more doubts, nothing else but the heat and the promise and the absolute certainty that they had just crossed a line from which there was no return. But Henry didn't kiss her. Not yet. He just smiled, that slow, dangerous smile, and whispered against her lips. Then I won't stop. The afternoon sun had shifted, casting long shadows across Henry's kitchen as they stood side by side, pretending that the morning hadn't changed everything. Kate had suggested making dinner together. Something casual, something normal to restore the equilibrium that had been shattered the moment she'd seen him emerging from that bathroom. But normal, she was quickly learning, was no longer possible between them. The apartment smelled of sautéed garlic and fresh herbs. Kate had insisted on making risotto, something that required constant attention, movement, busy hands. Anything to create a distraction from the way her body still vibrated with the unfulfilled promise of that morning. He hadn't kissed her. He'd stood there so close she could count every eyelash, and then simply pulled back with that infuriating smile, leaving her suspended in a state of anticipation that, now, hours later, still pulsed beneath her skin. Henry was preparing the salad, his movements efficient and precise, like someone who knew what he was doing in the kitchen. But Kate noticed he was distracted, too. She saw it in the furtive glances he threw her way when he thought she wasn't looking, in the way his jaw tightened every time she passed close by, in the breathing that became slightly faster when their bodies approached. Henry's kitchen, despite being modern and spacious, suddenly seemed too small for the two of them. Every movement required negotiation of space. Every step put them in each other's way, and Kate was beginning to suspect that none of these encounters were as accidental as they seemed. I need to get the cheese, she announced, heading toward the refrigerator. Henry was right in front, cutting tomatoes. Excuse me, she murmured, trying to pass behind him in the narrow space between the kitchen island and the counter. He didn't move. Kate felt his body solid warm, immobile as she tried to squeeze through the tight space. Her back brushed against his chest. Her hips touched his for a second that seemed to stretch infinitely. She heard his breath catch, felt his muscles tense against her. Sorry, Henry murmured, but his voice was hoarse. Small space. Yeah, she agreed, but didn't pull away immediately. She stayed there, feeling his heat radiate through the thin layers of clothing. Her heart was beating so loudly, she was certain he could feel it against her back. When she finally managed to move and open the refrigerator, her hands were trembling slightly as she grabbed the Parmesan cheese. He didn't ask her to move out of the way. He should have, but he didn't. Instead, he simply approached from behind, his body enveloping hers as he stretched his arm up. Kate froze, the wooden spoon suspended in the air over the steaming pot. She could feel every inch of him pressed against her back. His broad chest, the firmness of his muscles, the heat that seemed to burn through the thin t-shirt she wore. "Excuse me," he whispered near her ear, so close his lips almost touched her skin. Kate closed her eyes, fighting the urge to lean back, to allow herself to melt against him. You could have asked me to move. I could have." His fingers brushed lightly against her waist as he grabbed the bottle of olive oil. The touch so light it could be accidental, but it wasn't. But where would be the fun in that? She turned her head, finding his face inches from hers. She could see the golden flecks in his eyes, the slight shadow of stubble beginning to appear at the end of the day, the way his mouth curved in that half-smile that was both provocation and promise. "You're doing this on purpose?" she accused, but there was no anger in her voice, just acknowledgement, and perhaps a thread of excitement she couldn't completely hide. "Doing what?" Henry tilted his head, feigning innocence, but his hand was still on her waist, his thumb drawing slow circles through the fabric. "You know exactly what I want. Hear you say it." Kate turned completely now, trapped between the stove and his body. The pot bubbled behind her, forgotten. The entire world seemed to have shrunk to that small space, to that moment suspended between them. "You're touching me," she said quietly. "On purpose. You're getting too close, invading my space, making you what, Kate?" He took another step closer, eliminating even that last inch of distance between them. Now their bodies were completely pressed against each other, and Kate could feel every muscle, every contour, every breath of his. "Making me want you," she admitted, the words coming out in an almost inaudible whisper. His smile disappeared, replaced by something more intense, more hungry. Good, because I'm doing it on purpose. Because I want you to. Because I'm tired of pretending I don't." His hand slid from her waist to her back, pressing her closer against him. "I'm tired of keeping my distance, of acting like you're just my friend. Like I don't think about you every night before I fall asleep. Like I don't want to." "Henry." His name came out like a moan, a plea. "Tell me you're tired of pretending too." Kate knew she should be sensible, should think about the consequences, about work, about the friendship they'd built over 8 years. But with his body pressed against hers, with his eyes burning into hers, with the promise of everything that could happen hanging between them like electricity. "I am," she whispered. "I'm so tired of pretending." His breathing grew heavier. His fingers moved up her back, slowly tracing the line of her spine through her shirt. Kate arched slightly, her body responding to the touch as if it had been waiting for this her entire life. "Have you always smelled like lavender?" he asked, his lips brushing against her temple. "You already asked me that this morning." "I know, but I can't stop thinking about it, about your smell, about how you must taste." He pressed his lips against her temple, then descended slowly down her cheek, leaving a trail of fire. "Let me find out." Kate should say no, should pull back, but instead, she tilted her head, offering her neck, giving silent permission. Henry accepted the invitation. His lips touched the sensitive spot just below her ear, then descended slowly along the line of her neck. Each kiss light as a feather, but burning like fire. Kate let out a trembling sigh, her hands instinctively rising to his shoulders, holding him, pulling him closer. "God, Kate," he murmured against her skin. "You have no idea how much I—" A loud hissing cut through the air. The pot, the risotto, was overflowing, white foam spilling over the sides as it boiled uncontrollably. They separated abruptly, reality returning like a shock of cold water. Kate spun quickly, turning off the heat, stirring the risotto frantically while trying to control her breathing. "Damn!" she muttered more to herself than to him. Henry ran his hand through his hair, letting out a low, frustrated laugh. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have." "Don't." Kate turned to him, still holding the wooden spoon like it was a weapon of defense against her own desires. "Don't apologize. I wanted it too. But we need to think. We can't just—" She gestured vaguely between them. "We have to be sure of what we're doing." Henry nodded slowly, but she could see the frustration in his eyes mixed with understanding. "You're right. Of course you're right." He took a step back, creating physical distance that neither of them really wanted. Let's finish dinner." They worked in silence after that, but it was a loaded silence, vibrant. Every movement was still pure awareness of the other. When their hands touched passing a plate, both held on for a second longer than necessary. When she tasted the risotto and made a small sound of approval, she saw his eyes darken. When he licked his thumb after tasting the salad, she had to look away, heat rising up her neck. Finally, they sat at the table with a view of the city. Dinner was perfect, the risotto creamy and flavorful, the salad fresh and crisp, the red wine opening in generous glasses. But neither of them seemed really interested in eating. "Kate," Henry began, swirling the glass between his fingers, "we need to talk about this. I know, because if we keep going like this, if every time we touch, it's like it was in the kitchen." He paused, his eyes meeting hers across the table. "I don't know how long I'll be able to control myself." Her heart raced. "And who said I want you to control yourself?" His glass stopped in midair. "Kate. 8 years, Henry. 8 years pretending there was only friendship between us. 8 years ignoring every look that lasted longer than it should. Every touch that felt warmer than normal. Every time my heart raced when you walked into the room." She leaned forward, her voice low but firm. "I'm tired of pretending, aren't you? You have no idea." He set the glass aside and stood up, walking around the table until he was beside her. He extended his hand. "Come here." Kate looked at his hand, strong, tanned, promising things she barely dared to imagine. Then she looked at his face, at those eyes that knew her better than anyone, at that mouth she'd wanted to feel on hers since that morning. She placed her hand in his. Henry pulled her up gently, their bodies becoming dangerously close again. But this time there was no boiling pot to interrupt them. No excuses, just the two of them, and the truth they finally could no longer deny. "Are you sure?" he asked, his free hand rising to brush the hair from her face, his fingers sliding across her cheek with a tenderness that contrasted with the intensity in his eyes. "I'm sure I don't want to keep pretending anymore." "That doesn't answer my question." Kate placed her free hand on his chest, feeling his heart beating hard beneath her palm. "I'm more sure of this than I've been of anything in my life." And then finally, he pulled her even closer, wrapping her in his arms, and she let herself melt against him, their bodies fitting together like pieces that had always been made to join. They didn't kiss. Not yet. But they stood there embracing in the middle of the dining room, the city blinking outside, stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. And in that embrace, there was promise of everything that was to come. Of all the touches that would no longer be accidental, of all the nights when they wouldn't have to hold back anymore. "Stay with me tonight," Henry whispered against her hair. "It doesn't have to be. We don't have to. Just stay. Sleep in my room. Let me hold you all night." Kate lifted her face, meeting his eyes. She saw vulnerability there mixed with desire. She saw the man she'd known for 8 years and the man she was only beginning to truly know. "Yes," she whispered back. "I'll stay." And when he finally kissed her light, soft, a sealed promise, Kate knew there was no going back. They had crossed the line, and she didn't regret it one bit. The city lights blinked like fallen stars beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. As Kate settled into the corner of Henry's massive sectional sofa, the fabric was soft against her skin, a deep charcoal gray that somehow managed to be both masculine and inviting. She'd changed clothes, leggings and an oversized sweater that slipped off one shoulder, and her hair was loose, falling in soft waves around her face. Henry was in the kitchen opening another bottle of wine. Kate could hear him moving, the familiar sound somehow comforting. They decided to watch an old movie, something in black and white that neither of them would mind losing track of because they both knew the movie wasn't really the point. The point was being together in that intimate space at that late hour of the night when defenses are down and truth has a way of emerging even in unspoken words. The lighting was low, just a few strategically positioned lamps, creating a cozy atmosphere. Through the windows, New York pulsed with its endless energy. But inside that apartment, the world seemed to have slowed to a more intimate, more personal rhythm. "I found that Malbec you like," Henry announced, entering the room with two generously filled glasses. He'd changed clothes too, now wearing a faded gray t-shirt that hugged his torso in a way that should be illegal, and black sweatpants that hung comfortably on his hips. Kate accepted the glass, her fingers brushing against his in a touch they no longer tried to disguise as accidental. "You always remember everything, only the important things." He sat down beside her, not too close, but not distant enough. The space between them vibrated with possibilities. The movie started, but Kate barely registered the title. She was hyper-aware of Henry's every movement beside her. The way he settled into the couch, one arm stretched along the back, his fingers inches from her shoulder. The way he drank his wine, his lips touching the rim of the glass with a slowness that seemed deliberate. The way, from time to time, she caught his gaze in the TV's reflection, not watching the movie, but watching her. 20 minutes passed, or maybe it was 10 or 40. Kate had lost track of time, lost in the acute awareness of how their bodies seemed to gravitate toward each other, even without conscious movement. She'd started leaning against the arm of the couch, but now she was closer to the center, closer to him. "Are you watching?" Henry asked, his voice low, almost a purr. "Huh." Kate blinked, realizing she had no idea what was happening on screen. "The movie? Are you paying attention?" Of course. But it was an obvious lie, and they both knew it. Henry smiled, that slow smile she was beginning to recognize as dangerous. "So tell me what just happened." Kate opened her mouth, then closed it. "I was distracted by what?" "By you," she thought. "By the way your shirt stretches across your shoulders. By the smell of your cologne mixed with wine. By the memory of your lips on my neck earlier. By the thought of where your hands could be right now if I let them." "Nothing specific," she said out loud, taking a generous sip of wine. The liquid was rich and full-bodied, sliding down her throat and leaving a pleasant warmth in her chest. Or maybe the warmth had nothing to do with the wine. "Kate." The way he said her name slowly, deliberately, loaded with meaning, made something tighten in her stomach. "HM, come here." It wasn't a request. It was an invitation, a choice. She could pretend she didn't understand, could maintain the safe distance, could keep watching the movie that neither of them was really seeing, or she could accept what they'd both wanted since she'd walked through that door. Kate placed her glass on the coffee table. Then, in a movement that felt both natural and terrifying, she slid across the couch, inching closer to him. Not completely touching, but close enough to feel the heat of his body and hear the subtle change in his breathing. Henry reached out, lightly touching her ankle. "Lie down here," he said. Her heart jumped. "What?" "Your feet," he murmured. "Put them in my lap. You said earlier your back was sore from the boxes. Let me give you a massage." It was an excuse. They both knew it. But it was an excuse Kate accepted gratefully. She lifted her legs and rested her bare feet in his lap. Henry's hands wrapped around her left ankle first, his thumbs gently pressing into the arch of her foot. The touch was firm, warm, skilled, like everything else about him. Kate let out an involuntary sigh, her head falling back against the couch cushion. "Good?" he asked, his voice husky. "Very good." And it was true. But it wasn't just the massage. It was the intimacy of the gesture, the casual way he touched her feet, as if he'd done it 1,000 times before, as if her body was familiar and welcome territory. His fingers worked methodically, pressing, caressing, sliding from heel to toes and back. Then he switched to her other foot, repeating the process with the same careful attention. But Kate noticed that gradually his hands began to move up. First, just to her ankle, then to her calf, his thumbs drawing slow circles on the back of her leg. Then, just below her knee, where the skin was more sensitive. Kate opened her eyes, finding him watching her with an intensity that made the air feel heavier. The TV was still playing, black and white voices filling the silence, but neither of them was paying attention. "Henry," she whispered, not knowing exactly what she was asking for. "Tell me to stop," he said, but his hands kept moving up, slowly, caressing the side of her thigh through the thin fabric of her leggings. "Tell me and I'll stop." But she didn't say it, couldn't, because the truth was, she didn't want him to stop. She wanted more. She wanted everything. Henry must have seen the answer in her eyes, because he moved. In one fluid, deliberate motion, he guided her legs to the side, making room to move closer. And then he was there, leaning over her, one hand braced on the couch back beside her head, the other still caressing her thigh. "You're so beautiful," he murmured, his eyes traveling over her face as if memorizing every detail. "I always knew it, but seeing you like this here, with that sweater falling off your shoulder and that look in your eyes." He shook his head slowly. "You're killing me, Kate." "Then kiss me," she whispered, her hand rising to touch his face, her fingers sliding along the strong line of his jaw. "Please, kiss me." Henry closed his eyes for a moment, as if fighting himself. When he opened them again, there was something different there. A decision made, a line about to be crossed with no return. "If I kiss you now," he said, his voice so low it was almost a growl, "it won't be just a kiss. I know it'll change everything between us." "I know," she repeated, pulling him closer. "I want it to change." The distance between them shrank inch by inch, his breath mixed with hers. Their lips so close she could feel the heat, the promise, the weight of 8 years of restraint about to break. And then, when she was certain it would finally happen, when every cell in her body was vibrating in anticipation, Henry's phone rang, loud, shrill, shattering the moment like breaking glass. They froze, their lips millimeters apart. Henry let out a low curse, his forehead pressing against hers. "Ignore it," Kate whispered, desperate. "I can't. It's the Tokyo office. They only call if it's urgent." He pulled away, and Kate felt the cold take the place of his warmth. The frustration on his face mirrored exactly what she felt. Henry grabbed the phone from the table, answering with a curt, "Yes." That sounded more irritated than professional. He stepped away, walking to the window while speaking rapidly in Japanese, something about contracts and deadlines that Kate couldn't quite follow. She sat up, running her hands through her hair, trying to control her still racing breath. Her entire body was tense, vibrating with unsatisfied desire. Part of her wanted to laugh at the irony. After 8 years, after finally being at the right moment, the universe decided to interrupt. But another part of her, the rational part that had been systematically ignored since that morning, whispered that maybe it was a sign, that maybe they were moving too fast, that there were consequences to consider, conversations to have, certainties that needed to be established before they crossed that final line. Henry returned 15 minutes later, phone still in hand, his expression frustrated. "Sorry, we have a crisis with the product launch over there. I need to deal with it." "I know." Kate stood up, smoothing her sweater. "Go work. I'll go to my room." "Kate." He caught her wrist as she passed him, pulling her back. His eyes were dark, intense, full of unspoken things. "This isn't over." "I know. Tomorrow. Tomorrow. We talk for real about everything." "About us?" she asked, her voice small. "About us," he confirmed. And then, because apparently he couldn't completely hold back, he pulled her into a quick but tight hug, pressing his lips to the top of her head. "Sleep well." Kate nodded against his chest, inhaling that scent that was already becoming addictive, wood, and something subtly spicy. Then she forced herself to pull away, to walk toward the guest room, to put physical distance between them before her resolve completely broke. At the door, she stopped and looked back. Henry was still there, watching her with an expression that was both promise and torment. "Henry," she called. "Yes. You almost kissed me." A slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. "Almost. Next time." He leaned in slightly. "Next time there won't be an almost, Kate. Next time I won't stop." And with that promise burning between them like fire, Kate entered the room and closed the door. On the other side, she leaned against the wood, eyes closed, her heart still beating irregularly. Tomorrow they would talk. Tomorrow they would face what was happening between them. But today she would have to sleep with the ghost of that almost kiss, with the feeling of his hands on her skin, with the absolute certainty that there was no going back. And the most terrifying truth of all, she didn't want to go back. Not anymore. The city lights blinked like fallen stars beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows as Kate settled into the corner of Henry's massive sectional sofa. The fabric was soft against her skin, a deep charcoal gray that somehow managed to be both masculine and inviting. She'd changed clothes, leggings and an oversized sweater that slipped off one shoulder, and her hair was loose, falling in soft waves around her face. Henry was in the kitchen, opening another bottle of wine. Kate could hear him moving, the familiar sound somehow comforting. They decided to watch an old movie, something in black and white that neither of them would mind losing track of, because they both knew the movie wasn't really the point. The point was being together in that intimate space at that late hour of the night when defenses were down, and truth had a way of emerging, even in unspoken words. The lighting was low, just a few strategically positioned lamps, creating a cozy atmosphere. Through the windows, New York pulsed with its endless energy. But inside that apartment, the world seemed to have slowed to a more intimate, more personal rhythm. "I found that Malbec you like," Henry announced, entering the room with two generously filled glasses. He'd changed clothes too, now wearing a faded gray t-shirt that hugged his torso in a way that should be illegal, and black sweatpants that hung comfortably on his hips. Kate accepted the glass, her fingers brushing against his in a touch they no longer tried to disguise as accidental. "You always remember everything, only the important things." He sat down beside her, not too close, but not distant enough. The space between them vibrated with possibilities. The movie started, but Kate barely registered the title. She was hyper-aware of Henry's every movement beside her. The way he settled into the couch, one arm stretched along the back, his fingers inches from her shoulder. The way he drank his wine, his lips touching the rim of the glass with a slowness that seemed deliberate. The way, from time to time, she caught his gaze in the TV's reflection, not watching the movie, but watching her. 20 minutes passed, or maybe it was 10 or 40. Kate had lost track of time, lost in the acute awareness of how their bodies seemed to gravitate toward each other, even without conscious movement. She'd started leaning against the arm of the couch, but now she was closer to the center, closer to him. "Are you watching?" Henry asked, his voice low, almost a purr. "Huh." Kate blinked, realizing she had no idea what was happening on screen. "The movie? Are you paying attention?" "Of course," she lied, but it was an obvious lie, and they both knew it. Henry smiled, that slow smile she was beginning to recognize as dangerous. "So tell me what just happened." Kate opened her mouth, then closed it. "I was distracted." "By what?" "By you," she thought. "By the way your shirt stretches across your shoulders. By the smell of your cologne mixed with wine. By the memory of your lips on my neck earlier. By the thought of where your hands could be right now if I let them." "Nothing specific," she said out loud, taking a generous sip of wine. The liquid was rich and full-bodied, sliding down her throat and leaving a pleasant warmth in her chest. Or maybe the warmth had nothing to do with the wine. "Kate," the way he said her name, slowly, deliberately, loaded with meaning, made something tighten in her stomach. Come here." It wasn't a request. It was an invitation, a choice. She could pretend she didn't understand, could maintain the safe distance, could keep watching the movie that neither of them was really seeing. Or she could accept what they'd both wanted since she'd walked through that apartment door. Kate placed her glass on the coffee table and, in a movement that felt both natural and terrifying, slid across the couch until she was closer to him. Not completely touching, but close enough to feel the heat of his body, to hear the subtle change in his breathing. Henry reached out, lightly touching her ankle. "Lie down here." Her heart jumped. "What?" "Your feet," he murmured. "Put them in my lap. You said earlier your back was sore from the boxes. Let me give you a massage." It was an excuse. They both knew it. But it was an excuse Kate accepted gratefully. She lifted her legs and rested her bare feet in his lap. Henry's hands wrapped around her left ankle first, his thumbs gently pressing into the arch of her foot. The touch was firm, warm, skilled, like everything else about him. Kate let out an involuntary sigh, her head falling back against the couch cushion. "Good?" he asked, his voice husky. "Very good." And it was true. But it wasn't just the massage. It was the intimacy of the gesture, the casual way he touched her feet, as if he'd done it 1,000 times before, as if her body was familiar and welcome territory. His fingers worked methodically, pressing, caressing, sliding from heel to toes and back. Then he switched to her other foot, repeating the process with the same careful attention. But Kate noticed that gradually his hands began to move up. First, just to her ankle, then to her calf, his thumbs drawing slow circles on the back of her leg. Then, just below her knee, where the skin was more sensitive. Kate opened her eyes, finding him watching her with an intensity that made the air feel heavier. The TV was still playing, black and white voices filling the silence, but neither of them was paying attention. Kate felt his hands begin to move up her foot, repeating the process with the same careful attention. But as time passed, she noticed his touch slowly shifted higher. First, his fingers brushed her ankle, then her calf, his thumbs making slow circles on the back of her leg. By the time he reached just below her knee, where her skin was more sensitive, Kate couldn't help but open her eyes. She met his gaze, feeling the intensity in his stare, making the air around them heavier. The TV continued to play in the background, the voices of the actors still filling the silence, but neither of them was paying attention to it. "Henry," she whispered, unsure of what she was asking for, but feeling something in her voice betray her need. "Tell me to stop." His hands didn't stop. They kept moving slowly up, caressing the side of her thigh through the thin fabric of her leggings. "Tell me and I'll stop," he murmured. But she didn't say it. She couldn't. The truth was, she didn't want him to stop. She wanted more. She wanted everything. Henry must have seen the answer in her eyes because he moved. With one smooth, deliberate motion, he guided her legs to the side, creating space between them. He leaned closer to her, one hand bracing on the back of the couch beside her head, the other still caressing her thigh. "You're so beautiful," he whispered, his gaze traveling over her face as if memorizing every detail. "I always knew it, but seeing you like this, with that sweater falling off your shoulder, and that look in your eyes." He shook his head slowly. "You're killing me, Kate." "Then kiss me," she whispered, her hand rising to touch his face, her fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw. He closed his eyes for a moment, as if fighting himself, before opening them again. There was something different in his gaze now, a decision made, a line that was about to be crossed. "If I kiss you now," he said, his voice low and almost a growl, "it won't be just a kiss. I know it will change everything between us." "I know," she whispered, pulling him closer. "I want it to change." The distance between them closed, inch by inch. Their breaths mixed, the heat building between them. Their lips were so close now that Kate could feel the weight of every second, every moment leading up to the kiss. But just as she was certain it was going to happen, the phone rang, loud and sharp, shattering the moment like glass. They froze, their lips just millimeters apart. Henry let out a low curse, pressing his forehead against hers. "Ignore it," Kate whispered, desperate. "I can't," he said, the frustration clear in his voice. "It's the Tokyo office. They only call if it's urgent." With a heavy sigh, he pulled away, and Kate felt the coldness of his absence. Henry grabbed the phone from the table, answering curtly with a sharp, "Yes," that sounded more irritated than professional. He stepped away, walking to the window, speaking rapidly in Japanese. Kate sat up, running her hands through her hair, trying to calm her still racing breath. Her entire body was tense, vibrating with unsatisfied desire. Part of her wanted to laugh at the irony. After 8 years, after finally being at the right moment, the universe decided to interrupt. But another part of her, the rational part that had been systematically ignored all day, whispered that maybe it was a sign. Maybe they were moving too fast. There were conversations to have, certainties to be established before they crossed that final line. 15 minutes later, Henry returned, his expression frustrated, the phone still in his hand. "Sorry, we've got a crisis with the product launch over there. I need to deal with it." "I know," Kate said softly, standing up and smoothing out her sweater. "Go work. I'll go to my room." He caught her wrist as she walked past him, pulling her back. His eyes were dark, intense, full of unspoken things. "This isn't over." "I know," she replied, her voice small. Tomorrow we talk for real about everything." "About us?" she asked. "About us," he confirmed. Then, as if he couldn't completely hold back, he pulled her into a quick but tight hug, pressing his lips to the top of her head. "Sleep well." Kate nodded against his chest, inhaling the scent that was already becoming addictive, wood and something subtly spicy. But she forced herself to pull away, to walk toward the guest room, to put physical distance between them before her resolve completely broke. At the door, she stopped and looked back. Henry was still there, watching her with an expression that was both promise and torment. "Henry," she called out softly. "Yes, you almost kissed me." A slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. "Almost. Next time," she whispered. "Next time there won't be an almost, Kate. Next time I won't stop." With that promise burning between them like fire, Kate entered the room and closed the door behind her. On the other side, she leaned against the wood, eyes closed, her heart still racing. Tomorrow they would talk. Tomorrow they would face what was happening between them. But today she would have to sleep with the ghost of that almost kiss, with the feeling of his hands on her skin, with the absolute certainty that there was no going back. And the most terrifying truth of all? She didn't want to go back. Not anymore. The rest of the afternoon passed in a fog of anticipation. Kate tried to focus on reports, spreadsheets, and the dozens of emails that kept flashing up on her screen, but her mind kept drifting back to that kiss in Henry's office, to his promise, to the decision she had made to go to his room that night. Every time they passed each other in the hallway, there was an electric awareness between them, a look that lasted just a second longer than necessary, a small, secret smile that was just theirs. Once, he passed close enough for his fingers to brush against hers. A touch so brief it could have been accidental, but it sent shivers through her entire body. At 6 o'clock, Kate was packing up her things when a message appeared on her phone. "Henry, meet me in the parking garage in 5 minutes." She went down the elevator, her heart racing, mentally rehearsing normal conversations in case she ran into any colleagues. But the parking garage was nearly empty, most people already having left for the evening. Henry's car was parked in a more isolated corner, an elegant black sedan that matched him perfectly. She approached and he got out, opening the passenger door for her with the same old-fashioned courtesy that always made her smile. "Always the gentleman," she teased, sliding into the soft leather seat. "Only with you," he replied, and there was truth in those words that made her heart squeeze. The traffic in New York was as chaotic as usual, a sea of brake lights and impatient horns. But inside the car, it felt as if a bubble of peace surrounded them. The soft jazz music played on the stereo. The scent of his cologne filled the enclosed space, and his right hand rested on the center console, so close to hers that Kate could feel the heat radiating off of it. They didn't talk much during the drive. They didn't need to. There was something comfortable in the shared silence, as if they were saving their words for when they mattered more. When they finally arrived at his building and went up in the elevator, the tension shifted from comfortable to electric. Kate could see in the reflection of the metal doors the way Henry looked at her. It wasn't a friend's look. It wasn't a boss's look. It was the look of a man who wanted a woman, but was holding himself back by an increasingly thin thread. The apartment door clicked softly as it closed behind them. Kate placed her bag on the couch, and when she turned around, Henry was already closer than she expected. "Hungry?" he asked, but his voice was hoarse, and his eyes said that food was the last thing on his mind. "A little," she lied, needing something to occupy her hands, some activity to channel the nervous energy running beneath her skin. "I can order something or cook. What do you prefer?" Kate thought for a moment. "Cook. I'll help." They worked side by side in the kitchen, preparing a simple pasta with fresh tomato sauce and basil. But now every touch had a new meaning. Every brush of bodies was intentional. There was no pretending anymore. When Henry needed to grab the olive oil behind her, he completely enveloped her, his body pressing against her back for long seconds after he'd already grabbed the bottle. Kate felt his lips brush lightly on her neck. Not exactly a kiss, but a promise of one. "Henry," she whispered, her voice shaky. He didn't pull away. Instead, he pressed another soft kiss just below her ear. "The pasta is going to burn. Let it burn." But he pulled away anyway, a teasing smile on his face. They ate dinner on the terrace, the same terrace with the view of the city she had admired on the first night. But now, with the sun setting in shades of orange and pink, with candles lit on the table, everything felt different. More intimate, more significant. Even though it was still too early for the candles, everything seemed to hold weight. The wind tossed Kate's loose hair across her face. She absently brushed it away, but Henry was faster. He leaned across the small table, his fingers gently tucking a stray strand behind her ear with a tenderness that contrasted with the intensity in his eyes. When he went to pull back, Kate held his wrist. "Stay." Henry froze, his eyes meeting hers across the candlelight. "Kate, you said you were going to really kiss me, that you wouldn't stop." She slid her fingers along his wrist, feeling his pulse. "I'm waiting." Something shifted in his face. The last barrier of restraint crumbled. He stood, walked around the small table and pulled her chair back. Kate stood, and before she could process it, he had her pressed against the glass wall of the terrace, his body enveloping hers, one hand on the glass beside her head, the other holding her face, his touch gentle but firm. "If I kiss you now," he said, his voice low, "I won't stop." "Then don't stop," she whispered, repeating her words from before. And then, with no more hesitation, no more distance, his lips captured hers, with a hunger that seemed to have waited years to be satisfied. This kiss was different from the one on the couch. That one had been urgent, possessive, marked by jealousy. This was adoration and desire in equal parts. His lips moved against hers with slow deliberation, savoring every moment. His hands slid from her face to her neck, her shoulders, her waist, pulling her closer, eliminating the air between them. Kate let her hands explore too, fingers tracing his broad shoulders, down his chest, feeling the muscles beneath her touch. When he deepened the kiss, his tongue asking for access, she gave it willingly. Her legs weakened, and he must have felt it, because he held her more tightly, one arm wrapped around her waist, supporting her against him. The wind continued to blow around them, the city humming beneath them, but they were lost in their own world. A world where only the feeling of his lips on hers existed, his hands moving over her skin, his whispered name like a prayer against her mouth. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. Henry rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed, trying to regain control. "God, Kate," he murmured, "do you have any idea how much I wanted to do this? How many times I imagined kissing you like this?" "Show me," she asked, her voice thick with desire. "Show me everything you imagined." His eyes opened, and what she saw there made her tremble. not with fear, but with anticipation. It was pure desire, but there was something deeper in his gaze, something that had been contained for years. Henry gently turned her, switching their positions so that he was against the glass now, and she was pressed against him. His hands moved slowly up the sides of her body, making her arch against him. When he reached her face, he held it with both hands, his thumbs caressing her cheeks. "You're beautiful," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm completely addicted to you," he confessed, and then he kissed her again, this time with no hesitation. It was fire, it was need, it was the culmination of years of waiting, all of it consuming them at once. His hands were everywhere. Her hair, her back, her hips, each touch filled with respect, each one silently asking for permission to continue. Kate responded by pressing herself closer to him, her hands sliding under his shirt, finally touching the skin she had been imagining since that morning in the hallway. He was warm, solid, his muscles tensing under her touch. She scratched lightly with her nails, and the low moan he released against her lips sent a surge of heat straight to her core. "Kate," he murmured between kisses, his voice thick with desire. "If we keep going like this here on the terrace, I won't be able to stop. Then take me inside," she whispered against his lips. "Take me to your room." Henry pulled back enough to look into her eyes, searching for confirmation. "Are you sure? Because once we cross that door, once you're in my bed, I want to be in your bed." She placed her hands on his chest, feeling his heartbeat race beneath her palms. "I want you, all of you," she whispered. "Tonight." He looked at her, the last vestige of resistance in his eyes vanishing, replaced by desire. Then, he took her hand, intertwining their fingers, and gently guided her through the living room toward the hallway that led to his bedroom. They stopped at the door. Henry turned to her, his touch tender on her face, a contrast to the fire in his eyes. "Last chance to change your mind," he said softly. Kate smiled, reaching for the doorknob behind him and opening it. "I'm not changing my mind." When he pulled her inside, when the door clicked shut behind them, when he kissed her again under the soft light of the bedside lamp, Kate knew she was exactly where she should be. In his arms. Completely. No more hesitation. No more fear. Nothing standing between them. Henry's room was elegant and masculine, with dark gray sheets on a king-size bed, minimalist furniture, and a floor-to-ceiling window with a view of the city lights. But Kate barely registered the details, for the only thing on her mind was him. He kissed her again, slowly guiding her toward the bed. When her legs touched the mattress, he paused, pulling back slightly to look into her eyes. "I love you," he said, his voice full of depth and truth. "And these aren't just words. It's not just desire. It's not just chemistry. I love you, Kate, completely." Tears welled in her eyes. Tears of joy, relief, and the long-awaited words that her heart had whispered for so long. "I love you too," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I've always loved you. I was just too afraid to admit it." He smiled, the smile that belonged only to her, and kissed her again, softer, more reverent this time. When they lay down together, when their clothes were carefully removed with tender touches and whispered kisses, when there were no more barriers between them, it was perfect. It was right. It was destiny finally fulfilling a promise that had always been there, waiting for them to be brave enough to claim it. The soft light from the bedside lamp bathed the room in golden tones, casting dancing shadows on the walls as Kate and Henry lay together. The world outside had disappeared, the city, the complications of tomorrow. In this moment, it was only the two of them, and the truth that finally laid bare between hearts that had waited too long. Henry was propped up on one elbow, looking down at Kate with an expression that was both reverent and hungry. She lay beside him, her dark hair spread across the pillow, her eyes shining with love, trust, and the certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. "You're trembling," he murmured, tracing a slow line from her shoulder to her wrist. His touch was light, but it left a trail of fire in its wake. "It's not from the cold," Kate admitted, her voice huskier than she'd intended. It's nervousness. His eyes softened with genuine concern. Because we can stop at any time. There's no rush. We have our whole lives. His words hung between them like a promise. And Kate felt something inside her bloom, something that had been waiting for the right moment. It's not nervousness, she whispered, raising her hand to touch his face, her fingers brushing the strong line of his jaw. It's anticipation. It's wanting you so much that my body doesn't know what to do with it. His smile was slow, dangerous, completely masculine. Then let me show you what to do. He leaned in, capturing her lips in a kiss that started soft but quickly deepened. His tongue asked for access and she gave it willingly. The low moan he released reverberated through her body like a vibration. His hands began to explore, first her face, then her neck, slowly descending over her shoulders. Each touch was deliberate, adoring, as if he were memorizing every inch of her skin. When his fingers brushed against the side of her breast through her blouse, Kate arched involuntarily, pressing into his hand. So sensitive, he murmured against her lips, doing it again just to see her reaction. I imagined you like this so many times, Kate. Imagined you responding to my touch, moaning my name. But reality is so much better. He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. Can I take this off? His fingers toyed with the hem of her blouse, and she whispered, yes, before adding with a shy but bold smile. But only if you take yours off too. His laugh was low and full of promise. Fair enough. They helped each other, fingers clumsy with urgent desire but still respectful. When Kate's blouse came off, revealing a black lace bra that fit her perfectly, Henry stopped, his gaze filled with admiration. Perfect, he whispered, his voice thick with genuine awe. You're absolutely perfect. Kate felt a blush creeping up her neck, but there was no room for shyness. Not when he looked at her like that, as if she were the most precious thing he'd ever seen. When she helped remove his shirt, revealing the torso she had been dreaming of since that morning, she too stopped to admire him. Can I touch? She asked, her voice vulnerable, as if she were asking for something much more significant than just physical contact. Kate, he said softly, you can do anything you want with me. And she knew he meant it. She could see it in his eyes, the naked truth of his feelings. Her hands explored, sliding over his defined chest, feeling his muscles tense under her touch, tracing the lines of his abdomen. When she scratched lightly with her nails, he made a low sound in his throat that sent heat surging through her. Henry laid her back against the pillows, his body partially covering hers. His weight felt both delicious and comforting as he kissed her again, lips, jaw, neck, his touches tender, yet full of burning desire. Descending slowly, his hands explored her as if memorizing every detail. When he reached her heart, he paused, meeting her eyes. Still good? He asked quietly. More than good, she breathed, her fingers in his hair. Please, Henry, don't stop. He smiled, and what followed was less a series of movements and more a conversation between two people who had been holding back for far too long. Every touch spoke of trust, every kiss of the years they'd spent denying what they felt. When she whispered, I want you, it wasn't a plea, it was a confession. Henry searched her face for any doubt and found none, only the certainty of love that left him breathless. Are you sure? He asked, needing to hear it. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The rest came in a rush of emotion. The barriers between them disappeared, replaced by warmth, by belonging. They moved together as if guided by something greater than either of them. It wasn't hurried or perfect, but it was real. Henry, she whispered, her voice trembling. He looked at her as though seeing her for the first time, wonder in his eyes. You're beautiful, he said softly, tracing the curve of her face. And you're mine. I always was, Kate murmured. I just took too long to admit it. Their lips met again, sealing the truth between them. The world outside ceased to exist, leaving only the sound of their breathing and the quiet rhythm of two hearts finally finding each other. Later, they lay side by side, tangled in the stillness. Henry pulled her close, his hand tracing lazy circles on her back. "Stay," he whispered into her hair. "Not just tonight. Every night. Stay with me." She lifted her head, meeting his gaze. What she saw there, love, honesty, a promise, made her heart ache in the best way. "Are you sure?" she asked. "This changes everything." "Let it," he said simply. "I don't want to pretend anymore. I want you in my life, every day, every night. All of you." Tears filled her eyes, soft and happy. "Then yes," she said. "I'll stay, every night." He kissed her gently, sealing the promise, and when he finally pulled back, he held her close, as if afraid she might disappear. "I never thought this would happen," he murmured. "I always belonged to you," Kate whispered back. "It just took me a while to realize it." Henry held her close, their bodies pressed together, feeling the warmth and the steady rhythm of each other's heartbeat. They paused for a long moment, breathing in sync, letting the closeness speak for everything words couldn't. "You're beautiful," Henry whispered, his hand tracing lazy patterns along her back. "And you're mine. Finally, you're mine." "I always was," Kate replied softly. "I just took too long to admit it." They stayed like that, wrapped around each other, letting the moment settle. Henry kissed her gently, lingering, and Kate rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady strength of him beneath her. "Stay with me," he murmured. "Not just tonight, every night." Tears pricked her eyes, but these were happy tears. She lifted her head to meet his gaze, seeing everything she had ever loved reflected there. Commitment, trust, and the quiet certainty of being truly known. "Yes," she whispered. "I'll stay, every night." He pulled her into a soft, lingering kiss, sealing their promise, and then held her tighter, as if afraid the reality would vanish. "I never thought," he said quietly, "that it would really happen, that you'd be mine this way." "I always was yours," Kate murmured, nestling closer. "I just needed to understand it myself." They stayed entwined, skin to skin, breathing together as the night deepened around them. Eventually, Henry pulled a sheet over them, keeping them warm as the room cooled. "Sleep," he whispered, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "I'll be here when you wake. I promise." For the first time in a long while, Kate let herself completely relax. She let herself trust, let herself love without reservation, because she was finally in the right arms. And that made all the difference. Outside, the city pulsed, stars moved slowly across the sky, and the world continued. But in that moment, they had everything they needed. Each other. Morning came gently. Sunlight filtered through half-open curtains, painting golden stripes across the sheets covering their intertwined bodies. Kate woke slowly, memory of the previous night returning in delicious waves. The warmth, the closeness, the whispered words. She was still in Henry's arms, his body a steady, comforting weight against hers. A flicker of doubt and fear hit her. Had they gone too fast? Would daylight reveal a mistake? What if trying to be together ruined the foundation of their years-long friendship? She tried to disentangle herself quietly, but Henry's arms instinctively tightened, pulling her back. "Where are you going?" His voice was rough with sleep, low and filled with that deep, familiar intimacy that made her shiver. "Just need to think," she said, unsure how to explain the jumble of emotions swirling inside her. Henry didn't let go. He stepped closer, holding her shoulders gently but firmly, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Look at me," he said softly. When she did, she saw intensity, understanding, and tenderness in his gaze. "You think I'm not scared too?" he asked. "You are," she whispered. "Terrified," he admitted. "Kate, you're my best friend. You're the person I trust most in the world. Last night I risked that trust too because I love you. I couldn't keep pretending what I feel fits in the safe little box of friendship." He brushed a strand of hair from her face with a gentle hand. "I understand your fear, the urge to run before it hurts too much. But if I lose you, Not just as a friend, but completely. I don't know if I'd survive it. So what do we do? Kate's voice trembled. How do we make sure we don't ruin everything? He smiled softly, brushing his thumb across her cheek. We don't. There's no guarantee. Love is a risk. But what I know for sure, what I feel for you won't go away just because we're scared. It won't disappear if we pretend last night didn't happen. It will stay burning until I can't breathe right without you. Tears fell freely now, and she leaned into him, letting herself feel everything. Fear, love, hope, and the overwhelming relief of finally being seen. Henry pulled her into a tight embrace, holding her close as the world waited outside, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it together. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her close, letting her bury her face in his chest. But tell me something, he whispered. Do you regret it? Really? Last night? Everything we shared? Do you honestly wish it hadn't happened? Kate thought about the question. She thought about being in his arms, about feeling completely loved and accepted. She thought about every kiss, every touch, every whispered word. And she knew the answer. No, she admitted, her voice muffled against his chest. I don't regret it at all. Then don't run from me now. Not when we're just starting. He pulled back enough to look into her eyes, his hands holding her face with such tenderness it made her heart break and rebuild at the same time. Fight with me, Kate. Fight for us because I promise I'll fight, too. Every day if I have to. What about work? She asked, her voice still trembling. The complications. What will people say? Let them talk, he responded, his conviction leaving no room for doubt. I don't care what people think. We'll deal with the complications together. We'll set boundaries at work. Keep the professional separate from the personal. And if it becomes impossible, if the company becomes a problem, I'll pass my position to someone else. You're worth more than any business, Kate. You're worth more than everything. Kate looked at him. This man, her best friend, her lover, her heart walking outside her chest, and felt the fear begin to recede. It didn't disappear completely. It probably never would. But it was replaced by something stronger. Courage and love. So much love it couldn't fit inside her. I love you, she whispered, even scared, even not knowing how we're going to make it work. I love you more than I'm afraid. His smile was like the sun rising, bright, warm, transformative. That's all I need to hear. Then, he kissed her, soft, sweet, a sealed promise. When they separated, he rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed. Stay with me today, he asked. Call into work. Say you're sick. Spend the day with me. Let me show you what it'll be like. Let me show you that we can make this work. Kate thought about the meeting she had, the emails waiting, the responsibilities pulling at her. But then she looked at Henry, really looked at him, and saw the future she could have if she was brave enough to reach for it. Yes, she said, the decision making something settle inside her. I'll stay. And when he pulled her back to bed, when they spent the entire morning entwined, talking, laughing, planning, simply existing together, Kate understood something fundamental. Love would always be a risk. There would always be fear involved. But fear only won if you let it. And she wasn't going to let it. Not this time. Not with him. They sat on the living room floor later, backs against the couch, coffee mugs in hand, legs intertwined. And they talked for real, about expectations, about boundaries, about how to navigate work, about what they wanted for the future. I don't want to hide, Henry said, her hand secure in his. I don't want to pretend at the office that you're just my project manager when you're everything to me. But we need to be professional, Kate argued gently. We need to show we can separate things. We can, he agreed. But at the end of the day, when we leave that building, you come home with me to our home, and everyone can know that our home. The words made something expand in her chest. Let's take it slow, she said. But we won't hide. Fair. He lifted her hand, kissing each finger. I just need you to promise me one thing. What? When you get scared again, and you will, because fear doesn't disappear overnight, you come to me. Talk to me. Don't run. Give me the chance to remind you why it's worth fighting for. Kate looked at this man who knew her so well, who loved her with all her flaws and fears, and felt something inside her finally settle completely. I promise, she whispered. And this time, when he kissed her, there was no fear, only certainty. Certainty that they'd found something rare and precious, something worth every risk, every complication, every moment of uncertainty. They'd found each other for real, completely, and nothing, not fear, not complications, not the whole world, was going to take that away from them. 3 weeks had passed since that morning when Kate almost ran, and Henry convinced her to stay. 3 weeks of waking up in his arms, of sharing rushed breakfasts before work, of maintaining a professional facade at the office that fooled fewer and fewer people. 3 weeks of building something solid, real, impossible to deny. But they still hadn't made it official, not publicly. At work, they kept a careful distance. No touching. No looks that lasted too long. Nothing that would give people reason to talk. It was exhausting. It was necessary. Or at least that's what Kate had been telling herself. Until that Friday when the invitation to the company's annual party arrived in her inbox. Year-end celebration, bring your significant other. Kate stared at the invitation for long minutes, the cursor blinking over the confirmation button. She could go alone like she always did, could keep up appearances for one more event. Or, are you going? Henry's voice made her jump. He was leaning against her office doorframe, immaculate gray suit, tie slightly loosened from the workday. But it was the small private smile he gave her, the one that was only hers, that made her heart race. I'm thinking about it, she replied, spinning her chair to face him. What about you? I have to go. I'm the CEO. It would be kind of weird if I didn't show up at my own party. He entered the room, closing the door behind him, something that technically violated the open-door policy they'd established. But it was after hours, and most people had already left. Henry approached, walking around the desk until he was behind her chair, his hands resting lightly on her shoulders, thumbs making gentle circles on the tension accumulated there. Kate closed her eyes, letting herself melt under the touch. Come with me, he said softly, his lips close to her ear. Officially, as my date. Her heart jumped. Henry, I know we agreed to take it slow. I know we didn't want to complicate things at work too quickly. But, Kate, it's been 3 weeks, he said, spinning her chair to face him. Kneeling to be at eye level, his gaze was intense. 3 weeks where I've had to pretend you're just my employee when all I want to do is pull you into my lap during meetings. He covered her hand with his. I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of acting like what we have isn't the most important thing in my life. Kate touched his face, her thumb tracing the line of his jaw. People will talk. Let them talk. It could complicate your position at the company. It won't. And even if it does, you're worth any complication. He covered her hand with his. So come with me, holding hands. Let the world see that you're mine and I'm yours. Kate looked into those honey-colored eyes that had become her home, and she knew there was no more reason to hide. Not when what they felt was so real, so solid. Yes, she whispered. I'll go with you. His smile was radiant. He pulled her into a kiss, brief but intense, before forcing himself to pull back. Saturday night, 7 o'clock. Will you wear that red dress I love? Maybe, she teased, smiling. If you behave until then. Love behaving is the last thing I'll do when I see you in that dress. Saturday night arrived wrapped in anticipation and nervousness. Kate stood in front of the bedroom mirror, their bedroom now since she'd officially moved her things from the guest room, adjusting the red dress. It was elegant but bold, hugging every curve, with a neckline that suggested without revealing too much. A side slit that revealed her leg when she walked. She'd spent extra time on her hair, letting it fall in loose waves over her shoulders. Subtle but present makeup, emphasizing her eyes, her lips painted in deep red, matching the dress. High heels that made her feel powerful and feminine all at once. When she came out of the bathroom, Henry was adjusting his tie in front of the mirror, but when he saw her, his hands froze in the air, the tie forgotten. "My God," he murmured, turning completely to face her. "Kate, you look absolutely stunning." Heat rose up her neck under the intensity of his gaze. "Is it too much? It's perfect. You're perfect." He crossed the room in long strides, his hands finding her waist, pulling her against him. "How do they expect me to keep my hands off you all night? Professional behavior?" She offered a smile, her own hands sliding over his suit lapel. "You can do it. I trust you." "Your trust is misplaced," he murmured against her lips, but didn't kiss her, not wanting to ruin her lipstick. "Not yet, but I'll try for you." The party was held at a 5-star hotel in downtown Manhattan. By the time they arrived, the celebration was already in full swing. Live music, soft lights, elegantly decorated tables, and at least 200 people. Employees, partners, and investors. Kate felt her nerves tighten as they got out of the car. But then Henry took her hand. A firm, warm, reassuring grip, and intertwined his fingers with hers. "Together," he said simply. "Together," she echoed. They entered the hall hand in hand, and Kate felt the exact moment people started to notice. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. Eyes widened. The buzz of surprise spread through the room like fire on dry straw. But Henry didn't falter. He guided her through the crowd with confidence, his hand still holding hers, occasionally resting on the small of her back when they navigated between groups of people. It was possessive without being excessive, respectful but clearly declarative. "Henry, Kate." Marcus Chun was one of the first to approach, genuine surprise on his face. "You came together?" "We did," Henry confirmed. No hesitation in his voice, no embarrassment. "Kate is my partner in every sense." Marcus blinked, then smiled. A genuine smile without bitterness. "Well, that explains a lot. Congratulations to you both." "Thank you, Marcus," Kate said, genuinely grateful for the grace with which he accepted it. As the night progressed, more people approached. Some with curiosity, others with congratulations, a few with poorly disguised skepticism. But Henry faced them all with the same calm confidence. Kate, at his side, united with him. "Isn't it inappropriate?" one of the older investors asked, her voice laden with disapproval. "The CEO and an employee." "Kate isn't an employee," Henry responded, his voice polite but firm. "She's one of the brightest minds in this company, responsible for some of our biggest successes. And yes, she's also the woman I love. One thing doesn't diminish the other. If anything, I'm even more fortunate to have her in my life in both capacities." Kate felt her chest tighten with love for this man who defended her so fiercely, who wasn't ashamed of what they shared. At one point in the evening, Henry went on stage to make a speech, thanking the team for the incredible year, celebrating achievements, and outlining visions for the future. But in the middle of his speech, his gaze found Kate across the crowd. "And before I finish," he said, deviating slightly from the script, "I want to thank someone special. Someone who has been my best friend for 8 years. My confidant, my most trusted advisor." He smiled then. A small private smile, one that was only hers, but this time the entire room saw it. "The woman I love. Kate, thank you for making me want to be better. For believing in me even when I doubted myself. For standing by my side today, tomorrow, always." The room erupted in applause. Some surprised, many genuinely happy. Kate felt tears sting her eyes as Henry came down from the stage and walked directly to her, ignoring all the other people trying to get his attention. When he reached her, he didn't hesitate. In front of everyone, employees, partners, investors, the whole world, he pulled her into his arms and kissed her forehead tenderly. "I love you," he whispered, for only her to hear. "And everyone's going to know it." "I love you, too," she whispered back, not caring about the tears that were now flowing. "Thank you for not being ashamed of us." "Never," he promised. "You're my pride, Kate. You always have been." The rest of the night passed in a haze of congratulations, hugs, and surprisingly few negative comments. Most people, seeing how Henry and Kate looked at each other, how they moved together with the natural synchrony of years of friendship transformed into something more, couldn't deny it was real. When they finally returned home in the early hours of the morning, Kate kicked off her heels with relief and threw herself on the couch. Henry joined her, pulling her into his lap, arms wrapping around her. "Tired?" he asked, kissing the top of her head. "Exhausted but happy," she snuggled closer. "Thank you for tonight, for showing me publicly, for not hiding. I should thank you for trusting me enough to let me." He brushed the hair from her face, looking into her eyes. "You know what that meant to me? Being able to arrive at the most important party of the year with you on my arm. Being able to tell the whole world that you're mine." "Ours," she corrected gently. "I'm yours, but you're also mine." "Completely yours," he agreed, sealing the declaration with a kiss. "Forever if you'll have me." Kate looked at this man, her best friend, her love, her future, and knew there was no doubt. Not anymore. "Forever," she whispered. "I'll take forever." And there, in each other's arms, with the city sleeping outside and the whole world now knowing about their love, Kate and Henry finally had everything they needed. Each other, without hiding, without fear, just love, pure, true, and finally free. 6 months had passed since that night at the company party. 6 months of waking up entwined, of shared breakfasts, of navigating work as professionals and coming home as lovers. 6 months of building a life together, not perfect because no life is, but real, solid, undeniably theirs. The apartment had subtly changed to reflect Kate's presence. Her books on the shelves next to his. Photos of the two of them scattered across surfaces. That knit blanket she loved draped over the couch. Small evidence of a shared life. Of two becoming one without losing their individuality. It was a Friday evening in June, the warm air carrying the promise of summer. Henry had been strangely quiet all day, and Kate noticed. She always noticed. 8.5 years of friendship plus 6 months of dating gave her an accurate reading of his every mood. "Are you okay?" she asked during dinner, lightly touching his hand across the table. "You're quiet today." "I'm great," he replied, but there was something in his eyes. Nervousness, perhaps? Anticipation? Just thinking about us? About the future? He turned his hand, intertwining his fingers with hers. "Kate, are you happy?" The question caught her by surprise. "Of course I am. Why do you ask?" "I just need to know," he said, studying her face as if memorizing every detail. "I need to know if this life we're building is what you want." "Really?" Kate squeezed his hand, leaning across the table. "Henry, I've never been happier in my life. You know that?" He nodded slowly, something resolving in his expression. "Finish eating. I want to show you something." Curious, Kate obeyed, and when they finished, Henry guided her to the terrace. The same terrace where they'd shared their first real kiss. The place where everything had begun to change between them. The city stretched below them, an ocean of twinkling lights. But Henry had prepared the terrace in a way that made Kate's heart race. Candles were scattered across every surface, creating a soft, romantic glow. Rose petals, red, her favorites, formed a path to the railing where the view was most beautiful. "Henry," Kate whispered, tears already beginning to sting her eyes. "What is all this? Come here." He guided her along the path of petals until they stood at the edge of the terrace, the city spreading infinitely before them. Then he turned, holding both her hands, and Kate saw that he was trembling slightly. "I rehearsed this 1,000 times," he began, his voice slightly shaky. "Planned a perfect speech with all the right words. But now, looking at you with the candlelight reflecting in your eyes, all I can think about is how I got here." He took a deep breath. "Kate Morrison, you came into my life 8.5 years ago at a boring conference in Boston. You were nervous, wearing a suit that was too big, trying to impress people who weren't worth a second of your time. And when I saw you, when you smiled at me for the first time, I knew not what I know now, not yet, but I knew you were important. that you were going to change my life. A tear ran down Kate's cheek, and Henry raised a hand to gently wipe it away. You became my best friend, my confidant, the person I ran to when I had good news or bad, the only person who understood me completely. And for 8 years I pretended it was enough, that having you in my life as a friend was all I needed. But I was lying to myself, because from the beginning, from that first smile, some part of me always knew. He paused, and Kate saw the raw emotion in his eyes. Love, vulnerability, hope. It was always you, Kate, always. And when that pipe burst in your apartment, when the universe put you under my roof, I promised myself I wouldn't waste the chance, that I'd be brave enough to show you how I felt. And thank God I was, because these last 6 months, having you not just as my best friend, but as the woman I love, who sleeps in my arms every night, who makes me want to be better. Every day has been the best 6 months of my life. Henry released her hands, and for a moment, Kate felt a flash of panic. She thought something was wrong. But then, to her shock, he was kneeling. Actually kneeling, on one knee, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small velvet box. "Oh my God," Kate whispered, tears falling freely now. "Kate Morrison," Henry said, opening the box to reveal a stunning diamond ring. "Elegant, classic, perfect. Marry me. Not as my best friend, though you'll always be that. Not as my business partner, though I value your mind as much as I value your heart. But as my wife. As the woman I want to build a life with, create memories with, grow old with. Marry me because I love you more than I knew it was possible to love someone. Marry me because I can't imagine a single day for the rest of my life without you in it." Kate was openly crying now, her hands covering her mouth, trying to process the wave of emotion that threatened to drown her. For a long moment, she couldn't speak. She could only look at this man, kneeling before her, offering his heart, his future, everything. "Yes," she finally managed to say, her voice broken but firm. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." The smile that lit up Henry's face was like watching the sun rise. He took the ring from the box with trembling hands and slid it onto her finger. It was a perfect fit, as if it had always been meant to be there. Then he was standing, pulling her into his arms, spinning her while she laughed through tears. When he finally set her back down, he kissed her deep, passionate. A kiss that spoke of promises fulfilled and futures together. "I love you," she whispered against his lips when they finally separated. "I love you so much it hurts." "Good kind of hurt?" he asked, that smile of his returning. "The best kind." They stood there for a long time, embracing while the city pulsed below, the candles burning low around them. Kate looked at the ring on her finger, tangible proof of everything they'd built, of everything they still would build. "When do you want to get married?" she asked, resting her head on his chest. "Tomorrow, if you'd let me." He laughed softly. "But I know you'll want a plan. So, whenever you want, as long as it's me at the end of that aisle, the rest is just details." Kate thought for a moment. "Fall. I want to marry you in the fall, when the leaves are changing and the air is crisp. Nothing too big. Just the people who matter." "Perfect," he agreed, kissing the top of her head. "Absolutely perfect." The following months passed in a happy haze of wedding planning, work, and simply enjoying the fact that they were engaged. Kate wore the ring with pride, and every time someone at the office commented, she felt that burst of happiness in her chest. They chose an intimate venue on the outskirts of the city, a historic mansion with stunning gardens, perfect for a small and meaningful celebration. The guest list was kept under 50 people, family, close friends, colleagues who had become family over the years. And on an October afternoon, under a sky of perfect blue, with golden and red leaves dancing in the gentle breeze, Kate walked down the aisle toward Henry. She wore a simple but elegant dress, delicate lace flowing, hugging her fit, nothing excessive. Her hair was in loose waves with flowers woven through. Her bouquet was small, just red roses, the same ones from the night he proposed. But none of it mattered as much as the look on Henry's face when he saw her. He was waiting at the altar, his gray suit bringing out his eyes, and when she began walking toward him, She saw tears streaming down his face. She was crying too, but they were happy tears. Tears of finally arriving here. Of years of friendship transformed into love, of promises about to be sealed. When she reached the altar, Henry took her hands, and she saw everything in his eyes. Love, gratitude, admiration, the promise of forever. "Hi," she whispered, smiling through tears. "Hi," he whispered back. "You look absolutely stunning." "You too." The officiant began the ceremony, but Kate barely heard the words. She was lost in Henry's eyes, in the feeling of his hands in hers, in the magnitude of the moment. When it was time for vows, Henry went first. "Kate, you're my best friend, my partner, my love, my home." His voice trembled slightly. "You've seen me at my worst and still chose to stay. You've seen me at my best and encouraged me to be even better. I promise to spend the rest of my life loving you with everything I am. I promise to stand by your side in joy and sorrow, in health and sickness, in success and failure. I promise to be your safe harbor when the world is too harsh and your adventure when life gets monotonous. I promise to choose you every day for the rest of our days." Kate could barely see through her tears, but forced herself to speak. "Henry, 8.5 years ago, you came into my life and changed everything. You became my person, the one I ran to for anything big or small. And somewhere along those years, friendship transformed into something deeper, more true. You taught me that love doesn't have to be complicated, that sometimes it's as simple as choosing to stay when it would be easier to run. Like laughing together at 3 o'clock in the morning. Like holding each other's hand through the storms. I promise to love you with all my heart. I promise to be your partner in everything. I promise to build a beautiful life with you, full of love, laughter, and countless shared cups of coffee. I promise that when you come out of the shower every morning, I'll still look at you like it's the first time." Soft laughter echoed through the guests at that last line, and Henry smiled. That smile that was only hers. They exchanged rings with trembling hands, said, "I do," with firm voices. And when the officiant finally said, "You may kiss the bride," Henry pulled her into his arms and kissed her as if it were the first time and the 1,000th time all at once. The guests applauded, but Kate barely heard. All that existed was Henry, his lips on hers, the promise sealed between them. When they separated, he rested his forehead against hers. "My wife," he whispered, testing the words. "My husband," she whispered back, and they both smiled at the beauty of it. The reception was intimate and joyful. Good food, better wine, speeches that made them laugh and cry. Marcus gave a toast about how he'd known from the beginning that they belonged to each other. Kate's mother cried as she talked about finally seeing her daughter so happy. And when Henry made his own speech, thanking everyone for sharing their day, his eyes never left Kate. They danced under fairy lights as the sun set, their bodies perfectly synchronized after so many months together. And when Kate rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her ear, she knew she was finally home. "Happy?" Henry murmured against her hair. "More than I knew was possible," she replied honestly. "Good, because this is just the beginning, Mrs. Blake." Mrs. Blake. The name was still new, still caused a thrill of emotion every time she heard it. "I can't wait for the rest," she whispered. And it was true, because the rest meant waking up beside him every day. It meant building a family, maybe when they were ready. It meant growing old together, gray hair, wrinkled hands still intertwined. It meant all the small joys and challenges that come with a shared life. It meant forever. And Kate couldn't imagine anything more perfect. Years later, when they told their story, and they would, to friends, to family, eventually to children, they would always come back to that moment. To the burst pipe that forced Kate into Henry's apartment. To the morning she saw him coming out of the shower and realized she could no longer pretend. To the touches in the kitchen that were no longer accidental. To the almost kiss on the couch. To his jealousy that finally broke down the barriers. To the kiss on the terrace that sealed their fate. But more than any of those individual moments, it was the complete journey. 8 years of friendship providing the foundation. 6 months of dating building the structure. and now a lifetime stretching before them like an open road full of infinite possibilities. And every morning, when Henry came out of the shower, drops still sliding down his tan skin, wet hair, messy, dangerous smile on his face, Kate still looked at him exactly as she did that first morning. With desire, yes, but also with love. With gratitude. With the absolute certainty that he was hers. She was his, and nothing in the world could change that. Because some loves are written in the stars. Some are built day by day, choice after choice. And the best ones are both. Like Henry and Kate. Like they always were. Like they always would be. Forever.